let's first of all take a step back. Israeli Mossad, first of all, the problem of Hamas and its military capability is not the problem of Mossad. It's the problem of Amman, military intelligence. But both of those, when you bring them together, it's Israeli intelligence. And you said something interesting. We know they are the best in the world. They aren't the best in the world. Israel is a very small country with very limited capabilities, but they have created this propaganda machine of Mossad being the best. If you take a look at how Mossad acted after the Munich Olympics and their assassination program, it was incompetent. It was brutal. It wasn't smooth at all. If you Mossad tried to assassinate a Hamas leader in Amman, Jordan, by spraying a poison in his face, and they got caught. Two of them got arrested by the Jordanians, by the bodyguard, the guy who ran him down and put him on the ground. The other guys ran to the Israeli embassy and were cowering in fear, exposed. They're not good. They killed the wrong guy in Norway. They're not good. They're not good. We just have allowed them to create the perception that they are good. And the problem with that perception, again, I use a sports analogy. If we take two teams of equally qualified people, and the other team is convinced that this team is the best in the world, we're playing Mossad. Oh, God, they're so good. They already lost when they go on the field, because Mossad has convinced them that they're better. But if you just view Mossad as the incompetent pieces of manure that they are, intelligence is a tough business. And you know who fails in the intelligence business? Cocky people. People who think they know it all. People who think they are superior. People who take shortcuts. And everything about Israel is a shortcut because it's not done through hard work. It's done by saying, I'm a Jew. I'm Israeli. Help me. Cheat. Do this, that, and the other thing. And what happens when you go up against an entity like Hamas, Hamas doesn't view the Israelis as superior, because Hamas has successfully operated against the Israelis. They know the Israelis when they're at their best, and they know them at their worst. And Hamas built a plan that dealt with the reality of Israel. And the reality of Israel is they're not very good. October 7th proved that, proved it in spades. Their intelligence service just isn't that good because the Jews are not a supreme race. They are not imbued with some sort of special Jewish power. They don't wake up in the morning, drink Jewish coffee, and become supermen. They're humans just like us, the same as us. They get tired, they take shortcuts, they make mistakes. And if they buy into the notion of Jewish racial or ethnic supremacy, then they are not going to be aware of the mistakes they're making because they believe that they're above it. The Israelis became complacent. Look at their military. You know, the first thing I learned in the Marine Corps is that in order to win, you have to be willing to wade in and kill people, physically kill them, terminate them. We practice with the bayonet. Nobody else practices with the bayonet anymore. We do. Why? Because it's about killing. It's about plunging steel into a body, twisting it, pulling it out, butt stroking, and going on. The physical act of terminating a life. The Israelis don't do that. Why? Because as I'm plunging a bayonet, the other person could be plunging a bayonet too. And I could take one in the chest. I could die. I have to be prepared for that reality. Israelis do not want to die. They are casualty averse. When they lose an Israeli soldier, that is a strategic defeat for the nation. They mourn. So they have built a way of war that avoids closing with and destroying the enemy through firepower maneuver. They have allowed technology to take over. They have allowed an over-reliance on aircraft, on missiles, on standoff weapons. The entire wall around Gaza, it was a wall designed to keep Hamas in, to prevent them from coming through tunnels. The wall was built to detect tunnels coming under. That's the Israeli mindset. Remote control cannons operated from a control booth where some 18 to 19-year-old girl sat there and drank tea and ate a donut and manipulated a computer, playing a computer game, because that's what it was to her. An image on a screen, a cursor, and shooting rounds. Bam, 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 bam. But what happened? Boom. When the drone took it out. Now what are you going to do, honey? Now what are you going to do? Because you can't see anything. So you're sitting there, sipping your coffee, eating your donut. Hamas is closing in. They're taking out your sensors because they've planned it. They're not lazy. They know what they need to do. They come in They knock on the door, take it down, and now you're dead because you didn't prepare for it. You're not standing up. You haven't fixed bayonets. You're not charging the door. You're not ready to die. You're scared. You're cowering. That's what happened to the vast majority of the Israeli forces on October 7th. They were scared. They were cowering. And if they go into Gaza, it's going to be 100,000 scared, cowering boys and girls who aren't ready for this fight because Israel isn't that good. And we need to make sure that everybody in the world knows this because Israel's been fooling everybody.
When we look at the US foreign policy, considering Ukraine and now in Israel, if you remember when the war in Ukraine started, Putin was willing to negotiate with the West, with the Zelensky administration. But at that time, the US was talking about, no, we are not negotiating with Putin because that would benefit Russia. All along this 18, 19 months that we have this war in Ukraine, they were not willing to negotiate with Russia. Right now, 2 resolutions have been proposed at the UN by Russia and Brazil, both of them for ceasefire. Both of them were vetoed by the US. What's the strategy? How do you see the US foreign policy? It seems that it's not seeking any peace. It's just getting worse.
You keep using the term strategy. Stop using that term because strategy implies that you've actually sat down and you've thought through the entire process to a discernible and achievable end game that you want to get from here to there. The U.S. doesn't do strategy. The U.S. does reactive tactics and operations. And right now, we have a policy that says support Israel blindly without any exceptions, that anything that goes forward that is deemed to be negative to Israel, we must veto, etc. It's just blind. There is no strategy. There is no thought process here. There's nobody in Washington, D.C. saying, hey, maybe a ceasefire would be a good thing. Because if you say that, you're fired. Because the moment you say ceasefire, they'll say you're pro-Hamas. You're taking the Hamas position. Hamas wants a ceasefire. Hamas wants this. No, a ceasefire is actually the thing that humans look for. Because we're looking for a termination of the dealing of death that's harming innocent civilians. Again, with all the people that say Hamas wants a ceasefire, that just proves how stupid they are. And it's time. I mean, it's time that we have to be honest with our language. You know, it's not a time to treat people with respect anymore because people are dying in large numbers. So when I say stupid, I mean it with the bottom of my heart. Anybody who says that a ceasefire benefits Hamas is stupid because Hamas planned this operation to go on for 80 or 90 days without a ceasefire. Actually, continuing the war benefits Hamas, you stupid people, because Hamas knows that the more you bomb the Palestinians, the more they suffer, the more Israel loses. It's strengthening Hamas abroad. Why do you think there's people in the streets all throughout the world rising up in favor of the Palestinian people? Because there isn't a ceasefire. If you want the demonstrations to stop, put in a ceasefire, and all those peaceniks will do what peaceniks do all the time. Oh, it's a ceasefire, and they'll go home. And then you can quietly do what you've done all along, lead the Palestinians down the primrose path of betrayal, pretending that you care for them, that you don't. If you want to end this thing now, put in a ceasefire and pour in humanitarian goods. Be seen as helping the people of Palestine. Because what you're doing right there is breaking everything that Hamas wanted to happen. Because what you're doing is you're disenfranchised. Now, if Hamas takes action, they become the bad guys. They become the terrorists. Right now, Hamas is the noble resistor. And every day that Israel goes on doing what they're doing, they make Hamas appear more noble. The best way to get rid of Hamas, and Israel, if you're listening to me, please listen. Stop bombing now. Call for an immediate ceasefire. Send in every bit of humanitarian good you can. Send in all the gasoline. Send in all the food. Send in everything they need. Send in Israeli doctors, although they won't take them. But send everybody in there and say, we're ready to negotiate, and don't use an intermediary. No, Israel, be men about this. Say, we want to negotiate directly with Hamas about prisoner release. Hamas, we're at the table right now. We'll do it in Cairo. We'll do it at Qatar. We'll do it in neutral zone. But Hamas, you must come to us and you must talk to us about this release. We will not use middlemen. And Hamas is going to sit there and go, we can't do that because that legitimizes Israel. And now Hamas, you've just outflanked Hamas. The way you defeat Hamas is politically, not militarily. You defeat them politically by giving them the opportunity to do the right thing, then watch them not. So now when somebody steps in to resolve this issue of the prisoners, it will be because Hamas failed, not because Israel failed. Make Hamas fail. Expose Hamas for what you claim they are, to see if Hamas is truly this degenerate group of terrorists who don't want peace. Give Hamas a chance to prove what you claim they are. But what you're doing right now is just proving the point that Hamas is the noble resistance. This is how stupid the Israelis are. This is how stupid America is. I just gave you the winning formula. And it's a formula that was told to me by an Israeli back in 1998 when he talked about the problem with Hamas, because Hamas was a problem back then, how to defeat Hamas. He said the best way to defeat Hamas would be for us to negotiate directly with Hamas, because Hamas won't know what to do. But they wouldn't do that because you don't negotiate with terrorists. That's stupid. Israel's losing right now. America's losing. I happen to think this is good. I'm glad Hamas is winning. But if someone were to advise me and say, how do we beat Hamas? I just told you how to beat Hamas. Hamas will lose that fight because Hamas is not ready for that fight. Remember, in combat, the most important thing is to get inside the enemy's decision-making cycle. It's called the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Fighter pilots use it, and the Marines will use it for ground combat, but it's useful in every scenario. Right now, Hamas is making Israel react to Hamas. Hamas is in control of the decision-making cycle. You want to beat Hamas? Flip the script. Make Hamas react to you. Do the unexpected. That's how fighter pilots win, and that's how Hamas can be defeated. Make Hamas react to you. Not militarily, because they're ready for this. Hamas has been training for this fight. Hamas is prepared spiritually for the loss of thousands of lives because they recognize through the sacrifice of the Palestinian people, that's the only path they can take to get a Palestinian homeland. Israel can win this thing today by calling for a ceasefire and by allowing every piece of humanitarian good possible to flow in, and then say, we want to negotiate directly with Hamas about the prisoner release. Game, set, match. Israel just won. It's over for Hamas. But Israel's not capable of doing that.
When Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary, he was anti-war, he was pro-peace. Since this war in Ukraine started, we see a totally different manner of Bernie Sanders. This is the left part. This is the people to the left in Democratic Party. He was totally supporting sending more weapons and funds to Ukraine. Right now, just yesterday, he tweeted that he's asking for a humanitarian pause in Gaza, but he's not asking for ceasefire. What is happening to these people who were once against wars, advocating for peace?
Bernie Sanders has never been against war. Bernie Sanders is not a member of the anti-war coalition. Bernie Sanders is a walking, talking hypocrite. Bernie Sanders is only against war when it's to his political benefit. He's against the wars of the Republican Party. Is against the wars that the Republicans got us into. He was against the war in Iraq, the occupation of Syria, etc. But was he against the occupation of Syria? It'd be interesting to find out Bernie Sanders' voting record when it came to supporting the Syrian opposition to Bashar al-Assad. I think you'll find that he was for that war. See, Bernie Sanders is a warmonger. The Democratic Party is a warmongering party. They exist, they pray for war. They believe that wars can be good as long as the wars don't politically benefit their political opponents. So if it's a Republican war, Bernie will pretend to be anti-war, but his true colors have been exposed. And everybody, when they say Bernie Sanders' name, spit, because that's what he deserves. He doesn't deserve any respect. He's a disgusting Zionist. He supports Israel without any, there's no limit to his support. If you're not screaming from the top of your lungs in protest for the slaughter of the Palestinian people today, then you are a Zionist. If you are not demanding the termination of this conflict, if you are not saying not one more dollar to Israel, no more weapons to Israel, then you are a warmongering Zionist. You are the worst kind of person. Because if you claim to be somebody who is pro-Jewish, and I'm not against being pro-Jewish. Again, my approach in life is I'm pro-people. I don't care what your religion is. If you're Jewish, I support your right to practice your religion any way you see fit, so long as the practice that you choose does not put others at risk. For instance, Zionism can't say we turn here at the expense of Palestinian people. I won't support that. But I do believe that Jews should have access to the Holy Land, should be able to live in the Holy Land and live their lives and worship their God side by side with Muslims and Christians. That's an easy thing. But if you claim to be pro-Jewish, saying the Jews were persecuted over history, and they were. There's no doubt about that. The pogroms in Russia and Ukraine, in Europe, the murder of the millions of Jews at the hands of Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, the Shoah, as they call it, all real. And if this is your thing, that never again will it happen, and I happen to agree with that. Never again should the Jewish people be subjected to this kind of persecution. You need to understand that by supporting political Zionism, you are only guaranteeing that it will happen again. Because one of the key aspects of viewing someone as human is that they have to behave as human. They have to behave in a way that you recognize their humanity. But right now, Israel is shed its humanity. I love dogs. Anybody who has seen my podcast knows that I have 3 dogs, one of whom is a very vocal dog named Maverick. And if you criticize Maverick, I don't tolerate it very well because I love dogs. Dogs get rabies. And if a dog has rabies and he's roaming the street, it doesn't matter how much I love that dog must be killed because that dog is a threat to the dogs I love, to the people I love, to the community I love. It must be killed. Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird is a peace-loving man, but when a rabid dog was in the street, he took the rifle, he took the aim, he took the shot, he killed the dog. The Atticus Finch principle is when there is a rabid dog amongst us, that dog must be killed. Political Zionism is a rabid dog to humanity today, and it must be killed. Now, the best way to kill political Zionism is to attack it as an ideology, to expose it as a disgusting, decrepit ideology similar to Banderism, similar to the Nazi ideology of Germany in the 1930s and 40s. Blind violence, desire to inflict harm on somebody, it's just as evil as the people doing it. I call it Atticus Finch because it was selectively applied, but how many people are Atticus Finch? How many people are lawyers able to segregate? Hatred infects everybody. And what the Zionists are doing is encouraging people who otherwise would be more than happy to live in peace and harmony with the Jewish community of the world. They're encouraging them to identify Judaism with Zionism, make no distinction, and hold them all to account. And if you're Israeli, if you're Jewish, you should say never again. But never again means you can't empower those people to do this. And it's not just because people hate Jews. It's anything, any group of people that behaves in a manner that threatens the community at large will be singled out and will be attacked. If you believe in never again shall Jewish people be prosecuted, then you cannot support Zionist Israel the way it exists today. It's not supportable. And the best way to prevent the violence is to stop that ideology. I call it out as what it is and discourage people from embracing it, and get people instead to view the Jewish homeland in the Middle East as something positive, something that aspires to be what people thought it would be, living side by side in peace with their Palestinian neighbors, with Muslims, with Christians, as equals. People bought into that, except for the Zionists. They always knew that was a lie. And from the moment Israel was born, it was a lie. It was never designed to live in peace and harmony with its neighbors. It was always designed to steal the land, to oppress people, to evict people, to elevate Jews as the God's chosen, the superior, with a covenant to conquer greater Israel. Those days are over. And if you're Jewish and you want to buy into that and continue to support that, don't be surprised when never again becomes it's happening right now.
What you've seen from Europe, you've seen that they were totally unified against Russia. Right now, we can see some sort of division considering what's happening in Israel. How do you see the position of Europe right now, considering what's going on in Israel?
Well, first of all, when we say Europe, what is Europe? What is Europe? We keep using that term out there. The European Union, the European Commission. Europe used to be a collection of nations in a continent called Europe, but you had Spaniards, you had Portuguese, you had French, you had Italians, you had British, you had Germans, you had Dutch, you had Danes. So when you said European, people would say, well, but where in Europe are you from? But what's happened is they've with this European Union, they've tried to create just a European approach, a singular approach. And that was never going to work, because no matter how much you slice and dice it, a Spaniard ain't a German, never will be. An Italian ain't an Irishman, never will be. They will always retain this national identity. But Europe has, weakened itself by diminishing the national identity in favor of this thing called the unified European position. That might work when everything is coming up roses. The euro's doing well, you're in peace, the economy's doing well, so you begin this internal migration so that wherever you're born in Europe, you have a right to work over there. So if I'm born in Sicily, I can work in Poland. If I'm born in Poland, I can work in London, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't work when you start to hit it with adversity, when the economy start to collapse, because what's going to happen is people are going to look around and say, hey, we are in tough times. I want to support people that look like me, talk like me, act like me. I'm Italian. I want to support Italians. I'm not happy with what's happening here. If you're in Poland, I'm a Pole. I want to support Poles. I'm not happy with. And suddenly you start to see the reemergence of national identity. And that's the death of the European Union. What we see right now with what's going on with Russia is the death of the European Union, the death of this fiction of European unity. Because as Europe is subjected to stresses, as adverse conditions fall in, people will do what people always do. The tribe closes around the tribe. And that's what nations tend to do, fall in on themselves, turtle up, take care of themselves. And I think we're going to see Europe fall apart. And you said they, again, I when people say, they, because of their position about Russia, in order to have a position on Russia, you have to understand Russia. I will tell you right now that Borrell knows nothing about Russia. Van der Leyen knows nothing about Russia. Macron knows nothing about Russia. Scholz knows nothing about Russia. There are no Russian experts in Europe today. There's a bunch of amateurs that run around with this this fictional narrative about the evil Vladimir Putin and the reemergence of Russian imperialism trying to recapture the spirit of the. So if anybody says that, again, I'd say it's time that we stop mincing words. They're idiots. They're stupid. It's stupidity because they are ignorant about the reality of Russia. That doesn't mean that you don't talk about Vladimir Putin. He is the leader. He is the leader that's been the leader for more than 2 decades. So you must speak about Vladimir Putin because he has transformed Russia. And if you're going to talk about Russia, you have to talk about Russia that has been that has been built by Vladimir Putin. But it's not just one man. It's a system. There is a bureaucracy. There are institutions in Russia that all work together and in a collaborative fashion to produce this thing called Russia. And if you're not dealing with that reality, again, if you don't define a problem, how can you solve the problem? If I look at you and I say you're the problem, but I define you as a robot made out of concrete, and so now my solution is that I'm going to look to disengage your electricity and weaken your mortar. Wait a minute, you're flesh and blood and a human. I mean, everything I just said isn't going to impact you because I haven't defined you properly. If you don't define the problem, any solution you come up with solves nothing because you're not solving the problem at hand. Europe doesn't know how to define Russia. So any European policies that have been put forward, from sanctions everywhere, will fail. And they were doomed to fail from the start. And this failure of those policies, combined with the adverse reactions because of these policies, sanctions boomeranging back on Europe, high energy costs destroying the European economy, deindustrializing Europe, Germany. Now you have this adversity sinking in. So the ignorance of not knowing the problem has created the conditions where adversity comes in and Europe will fall apart. And that's what's happening right now.
Before this conflict in Israel started, we heard that the Republican Party, specifically the Republican Party, was talking about that Ukraine is dead. Let's focus on Taiwan. Right now, we have a new battle in Israel. Is Ukraine going to fade away in the U.S. foreign policy? Or as Janet Yellen said, that the U.S. economy is doing great and we can support two wars?
Well, let's just be honest. We weren't supporting one war, the war in Ukraine. How are we supporting it? Ukraine was losing. Ukraine has always been losing. By supporting it, I mean, if Janet wants to say that we can continue policies that result in the deaths of hundreds of thousands additional Ukrainian troops, yes, Janet, I agree. If Janet wants to say that we can have policies that send aircraft to Ukraine only to see them shot down in large numbers, yes, Janet, I agree. If you want a policy that will see Russia continuing to destroy Ukrainian air defense and Ukrainian infrastructure, yes, Janet, I agree. We can do this, Janet, because we're doing it. So you're good to go, Janet. Now, you want to support a war in Israel, too. Great. What war are you supporting, Janet? The continued humiliation of the Israeli armed forces, the continuing empowerment of Hamas by giving Israel the ability to slaughter innocent, defenseless Palestinians. Yes, Janet, we can do that. But, Janet, you know what? In the military, we don't want to just fight wars. We want to win wars. And the best way to win a war is not to fight it. The best way to win a war is to avoid conflict, to seek diplomatic outlet. And that's where she lacks imagination. Because the stupidity, and again, I'm sorry, my wife gets very mad at me when I use these words, but it's time just to drop all pretense. If I don't call you stupid when you are stupid, then somehow you'll think that I respect you. I don't respect Janet Yellen because she's an idiot. She's stupid. And one of the reasons why she's stupid is that her words lead to policies that lead to dead people, dead innocent people, lots of them in Ukraine, in Palestine, and in Israel as well. We can continue. We can fight two wars. There's no doubt about that. But we have proven we can't win one war. And now we're throwing in another one. We're not going to win it. She's not talking about victory because she doesn't know what victory looks like. She can't define victory. What we need Janet to say is, you know, what we need to do is take a step back and bring about a termination of the conflict and see if there's a way that we can peacefully achieve the goals and objectives we want. Because a pro tip to Janet, right now, if the war in Ukraine was to end, Ukraine is going to lose 20% of its territory. Their economy is devastated, hundreds of thousands are dead. But had Janet Yellen supported diplomacy, say in March 26th of last year, and said, instead of saying, hey, let's sabotage the peace agreement that Russia has negotiated with Ukraine, and instead say, let's support it. Let me tell you what it would look like today. Kherson would be Ukrainian. Zaporizhia would be Ukrainian. The Donbass would be going through a referendum to determine where they were going to be. 500,000 Ukrainian men would be alive today. Trillions of dollars of infrastructure would be undamaged. Children, millions of them would be at home with their families getting educated. And instead of focusing on how to join NATO, Ukraine would be focusing on how to better get involved with the European Union or with Russia or the international economy. They'd be thinking these things. Now, imagine what I just said. Kherson, Ukrainian, Zaporizhia, Ukrainian, Donbass going through a referendum. If someone told me that was the objective of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, well, I just told you you could have achieved it through diplomacy over a year and a half ago. Do you see the futility of war? Do you see how stupid it is? Do you see why we should never allow people who don't know anything about war to talk about war? Janet Yellen should be supporting peaceful diplomatic outcomes and she is supposed to be about the economy. Does she not understand this war has destroyed Ukraine's economy? Europe's economy is hurting America's economy. Had we made peace back in March, imagine the trillions of dollars that would have been reallocated into more positive outcomes and the economic benefit that would have been accrued from that. That's what a true economic genius thinks of. She's not an economic genius. She proved it with her words, and she doesn't know a damn thing about the military. She's just an idiot, a fool. She's stupid. We don't need to listen to her anymore. We need to call her out for what she is. We need to call out everybody for what they are when they articulate policies that promote war over peace.
The former advisor to the Zelensky's office just said the Russian army will take Avdiivka, and that could be the end for the whole system of war against Russia that could bring down everything. How do you see the battlefield right now in Ukraine? The Ukrainian were talking about that Russian are using mixed tactics against Ukrainian. How does it look like right now?
I don't know what a mixed tactic is. I know that the Russians are winning. The Russians have adapted to the realities of the battlefield. That Russia has an operational methodology that plays to its strengths and designs to exploit Ukraine's weaknesses. And remember, war is an extension of politics by other means, meaning that if you understand the political motivations of your opponent and how to transform those motivations into behavior on the battlefield that's predictable, you can control the battlefield. So